Good evening.
Hello, everyone. Is that okay? Welcome. My name is Jen Fallon. I am the Vice President of Voter Services here at the League of Women Voters of Wellesley. Our president, Bonnie Nathan, sends her deepest regards. She is home ill, not COVID. She didn't want to get anyone sick, so she is home tonight. So we thank her when she watches the replay, and we miss her. So we want to welcome all of you for coming out tonight for our opening meeting of the 2023-24 season. I have to tell you, I told a few people that I was on my way to a book banning meeting tonight, and people were aghast, thinking that I was trying to ban books. Oh no, I'm on the other side. But anyways, just a little bit about the mission. The League of Women Voters actually is an outgrowth of the suffragette movement, founded 103 years ago by Carrie Chapman Catt on February 14th, 1920. What's so important about the League is that we're a nonpartisan political organization, and we're here to encourage informed and active participation in government, which is so important today. And we're also working to influence public policy through education and advocacy. We would like to welcome all of our League of Women Voters of Wellesley board members tonight. And I'm going to hand this over to Marguerite, who's going to say everyone's name, ask them to stand, and then we're going to give a rousing round of applause.
Irene Flint. Ramaswamy. Margie Palladino. Raise your hand. I'm missing someone. Debbie Kadispoti. Wow. Laura
Brown McKinnon.
Laura Brown McKinnon, please stand. And Mara Lanza, please stand. Thank you all.
Thank you. We thank you all for your hard work, because without your hard work, none of us could be here tonight. And I know that I'm extremely excited to hear tonight's presentation and question and answer afterwards. I'd like to welcome Ann Mara Lanza up to the podium, where she's going to introduce our speakers, and then Marguerite and I will be back at the end.
Thank you, Jen. So I am so excited to introduce our speaker for this evening. As I call her, she's a resident extraordinaire and someone who has done a lot for our community in all aspects, for NRC, the RDF, the library, town meeting. We are all so grateful that Marianne chose to live in our community and dedicate her time. So Marianne Kluggish has dedicated more than 20 years to ensuring the freedom to access information in our libraries. She is a former chair and current member of the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, on which she has served since 2011. Ms. Kluggish also served as a trustee of the Wellesley Free Library for 12 years and is a current member of the Friends of the Wellesley Free Library. She is a life member of the League of Women Voters. Joining Marianne this evening will be Jamie Jurgensen and Linda Chow. Jamie has worked in public, private, and school libraries across the country for almost 30 years. She has been the library director of the Wellesley Free Library for 8 years, where she and the WFL team of trustees, librarians, and paraprofessionals work to provide diverse materials, programs, and services for our community. Linda Chow is in her 6th year on the school committee. She has lived in Wellesley for almost 30 years, and she is also a proud member of the League of Women Voters. So with that, I'd like to welcome Marianne.
Thank you, Ann Mara. Nice way to let everybody know how old I am.
They don't know what a life member is.
Oh, okay. It's been a while. Okay, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for coming this evening. You know, I was asked to run for library trustee here in Wellesley back in 1999, mainly to get this new building built, get it through town meeting. I served as a trustee for 12 years, as Anmara said, and as chair, I was so intimately involved with the construction of this building that the director and I chose the color of the mortar between the bricks. To this day, I am so proud whenever I walk in here that I think my head is going to explode. In 2011, I was appointed to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners by Governor Baker, reappointed twice by Governor Patrick, reappointed twice by Governor Baker. The MBLC has statutory authority to oversee, advise, support, and assist Massachusetts public libraries. We also promote library services and support and assist all librarians. Why do I tell you this? Why would I devote 24 years of my life volunteering for libraries? Because I believe deeply in the importance of education and freedom of access to information. Most people have forgotten that the original purpose of the public library as an institution was for an educated citizenry to make democracy work. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "An educated citizenry is a vital requisite for our survival as a free people." Yes, I know he had slaves, okay? Intellectual freedom includes freedom of access to information, freedom of opinion, and freedom of expression. Access to information and dissemination of ideas is critical to a free and dynamic society, which is pretty much what libraries are about. I take seriously what it says on the top of the north side of the Boston Public Library. Since 1895, it says, "The Commonwealth requires the education of the people as a safeguard of order and liberty." That's why 24 years has been and is worth it. But now libraries in the United States are under attack. Librarians, already burdened post-pandemic by a loss of workforce, and each of them doing about 2.5 jobs, find themselves on the front line of defense against hate, prejudice, and racism in what has become the latest American culture war. Constant happenings in Massachusetts, from as mild as a man walking around the Worcester Public Library every day with a custom sweatshirt that says, "Your children are not safe in this library," to masked neo-Nazis showing up at the Fall River Library. According to the American Library Association, there have been a record number of book challenges across the nation. In 2021, ALA's Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked 1,858 individual book challenges or removals. In 2022, that number almost doubled to 2,571, and so far this year, that's up 20%. Book challenges used to be mostly from an individual patron or an individual parent. Now, many challenges are initiated by outside groups which seem to use a similar playbook and similar wording. In 2022, 90% of reported challenges nationally were demands to censor multiple titles at the same time. And of those demands, 40% of them tried to remove or restrict 100 titles all at once. Most challenges are to books written by or about people of color or LGBTQ persons. Here's how it stacks up. If you can't read it in the back, 41% have a protagonist or major character of color, 33% have LGBTQ themes, 25% have content about sex, puberty, or relationships, and 22% discuss race. Book challenges and library disruptions in Massachusetts are posing an emotional burden on librarians. Attacks designed to intimidate, both in person and online, are becoming part of their workday. Librarians are calling the MBLC office in tears. They consider themselves public servants, but they're being shouted at, called names to their face, and even threatened. My heart simply breaks. It has reached a point where the Mass Municipal Association, MMA, is holding training sessions for library and town hall workers on how to handle attacks and intimidation. In 2022, the MBLC did a survey of Mass public libraries. Less than a third responded. Challenges and disruptions nearly quadrupled in 1 year, from a total of 20 in 2021 to 78 in 2022. 57 titles were challenged. In the previous 9 years, the total was 38, over 9 years. We know many libraries don't report, and we don't hear about all of the challenges. We also know that underreporting is the case nationally. It's important to understand that public libraries and librarians do not serve as in loco parentis. Librarians are not following children around the library as they browse for books, and they're certainly not directing children to books that are not appropriate for their age. Parents are expected to play an active role in their children's information sources, and for that matter, what they're looking up on their cell phones. If you don't want your child to read a book that he or she has brought home, it's up to you to discuss that with your child. This is how it works, folks. If you can't read it in the back, I'll be happy to read it. In the first panel, the parent says, "Who let my child read this?" The librarian says, "You did." Second panel, parent, "I wasn't even here." Librarian, "Exactly, I'm glad you understand." In the third panel, parent, "So if I'd been here, he wouldn't have read this?" Librarian, "That would have been between you and your kid." Fourth panel, parent, "Would you let your kids read this?" Librarian, "That's between me and them." I could actually leave now, because that's it. Talking to your child if they want to read a controversial book requires some forethought. How well do you know what your child likes and can handle? How well is your child able to separate fiction from reality? As a parent, will you read that book with your child and talk with them about it? Or maybe you should read it first. But if you just say no to a book, the chances are very good the child will find it and read it secretly. Whoops, then you've lost the opportunity to discuss it with them. Sometimes books that are too mature do wind up in the children's section and should be moved to a teen level. It happens, but it's rare. Librarians constantly check to make sure items are found in the right place. We know that libraries are the other half of the education equation, and so I just need to talk about the importance of school librarians for a minute. Part of a school librarian's job is to ensure students are matched with age-appropriate materials. Licensed school library teachers are required to have a master's degree in library and information science. Not only do they connect students with the right materials, but they also teach research skills. the latest technology, and critical thinking. They develop library curriculum to help students learn to safely navigate social media and to how to identify misinformation online. Years of studies show students whose schools have licensed school library teachers score significantly better on standards-based language arts, reading, and writing tests, regardless of student demographics and school location. Yet in Massachusetts, 20% or more of school libraries do not have professionally licensed school librarians. Unfortunately, school librarians are declining in numbers every year, and sadly, they are slowly disappearing. In the absence of school librarians, it's often the principal who decides what, if anything, is purchased for the library, or in many school, library aides or even parent volunteers choose what is purchased for the library. We do agree that public libraries are supposed to serve everyone, right? You may ask, but what about really offensive books or extremely violent movies? Well, there's a famous saying, a truly great library has something in it to offend everyone, and that everyone includes me. There are likely books in this library that I would find offensive. I haven't gone searching for them. But if a book that offended you or me helped another person and was of value to them, neither you nor I have the right to deprive others of information that they might find valuable, and that is fundamental to intellectual freedom. Here in Massachusetts, we are working to protect intellectual freedom, while I'm sure you've read about other states doing the opposite. The League asked me to explain anti-book banning legislation that is currently on the Hill. A bill to prevent book banning was successfully passed in Illinois. Here in Massachusetts, Senator Julian Cyr from Cape Cod also wanted to file such a bill, but he wisely contacted the MBLC since the Illinois bill wouldn't work here with the Massachusetts library ecosystem. Julian Cyr's legislative counsel and the professionals from the MBL staff sat down and drafted the language for the bill to fit like a glove with how libraries operate here in Massachusetts, and to also include strong protections for librarians and for school libraries. Freedom of speech means you can't just write a bill that 100% says you can't ban books. Just can't be done. Freedom of speech gives you the right to challenge books. But legislation that provides the process to make a book challenger adhere to certain actions can be written. So let me start with the guts of Julian Cyr's bill. It all begins with what a library decides to buy for their collection. The key to that starts with a well-thought-out and well-written collection development policy. Here's where we're going to get very nerdy from here on in. It's a policy written only by the professionals, librarians with a master's degree in library science. The American Library Association says, this requires the professional expertise of librarians who work in partnership with their communities to curate collections that serve the information needs of all of their users. After the professionals write the policy, the library trustees must approve it with a formal vote. You can find Wellesley's collection policy on the library website. Here are a few excerpts. It begins, materials in the library's collection are chosen for their relevance in meeting the diverse intellectual, cultural, and recreational needs of the community. Skip down a page and it says the material selection process shall follow established professional standards and shall not reflect the personal interest or bias of any individual. And then it goes on to talk about the criteria. That just gives you an idea. The policy itself is 2 pages long, but the Wellesley Free Library also has a terrific 15-page collection plan. It's the only one I've seen. I am so impressed. We should be very proud, by the way. The Wellesley school libraries have an excellent library material selection policy. It lays out very clear procedures for choosing materials with a very clear list of selection criteria, and you can find it on the school website. The legislation requires that every collection policy must be guided by the ALA Bill of Rights and the ALA Freedom to Read Statement. If the bill, SD 2673, becomes law, can you hear me if I turn away from the microphone? Okay. I learned how to project years ago. The legislation requires, as I said, that it must require the ALA Bill of Rights. But if SD 2673 becomes law, materials cannot be chosen on personal or political views and only chosen on professional training. Both of the WFL and our school policies already do that. For schools statewide, I would say in general that to describe the legislation as strengthening school libraries in a way that offers considerable protection for the library's collection and enabling a clear process for handling a challenge to materials in school libraries. It includes criteria for choosing the materials with new language to be added statewide for both school and public libraries. As I said, it can't be chosen on political or personal views. Unfortunately, not every school district in the state even has policies and procedures for choosing materials or handling book challenges. I'll come back to how schools handle book challenges, but let's get back to public libraries. Massachusetts has, if you thought we were nerdy before, we're really about to get nerdy. Massachusetts has a sophisticated and unique set of regulations promulgated into a statewide state aid program that establishes high standards for Massachusetts public libraries. It's the reason that Massachusetts generally and consistently has excellent public libraries. We should. We're the oldest library system in the state, in the country, and the most experienced library system in the country. The state aid program is voluntary, and of the 350 public libraries in Massachusetts, 348 are currently participating. State aid to public library provides significant funding to participating libraries each year if they follow the program requirements. There's an appropriation requirement, an hours open requirement, and more. The libraries must report to the MBLC, and the reports are very closely monitored. In the legislation, the collection policy for the first time will be added as a mandatory requirement in the CMRs, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts regulations for the state aid program. The state aid program consists of a very effective set of incentives and disincentives, both a big carrot and a very big stick. The incentive for a town to participate is certification for their library, financial state aid coming to the library, and the ability to participate in reciprocal borrowing. I mean, don't we all love it that we can order a book or a DVD, and if Wellesley doesn't have it or it's out of stock, it'll come from somewhere else or even from out of state. That reciprocal borrowing is a huge incentive. And the funding? Last year, the Wellesley Free Library received well over $66,000. That money goes directly to the library and cannot be spent on anything except library, legitimate library needs. If the legislation passes, and if a library does not have a collection policy as described in the law, it won't receive state aid and won't be able to participate in reciprocal borrowing. And residents will only be able to check out materials from their own small library. If the town has and then loses library certification, it's likely that their residents will lose the ability to borrow from other towns. Each public library has the right to allow or deny borrowing to privileges to residents in other communities if their libraries are not certified. If a library loses the privilege of reciprocal borrowing, I always imagine residents taking to the streets with torches and pitchforks, because when it happens, it creates a heck of a lot of political pressure. So how will this all help fend off book challenges? First of all, since participating libraries, public libraries, will be required to follow the process as set up by the regs, it sets up a strong, consistent system across the state for public libraries. The consistent process makes each individual library stronger. They're not alone. Any person challenging books will find that they are met with the same invitation at any public library, big, small, tiny, or teeny, and we do have some teeny ones, to review a publicly available collection policy, and they will be politely redirected to a reconsideration form. I brought Wellesley's along to fill out for each. If they want to, challenge 100 books, they have to fill out a reconsideration form for each item, and they can be assured that their challenge will go through a formal process. We know that many book challenges come from people who have not even read the book. The reconsideration form asks questions that require some familiarity with the materials. For both school and public libraries, a book challenger will have to come up with the specific evidence for a book to be removed. At public libraries, the reconsideration form asks questions and, the book challenger has to come up with the specific evidence, and at public libraries, the reconsideration form will be reviewed by the director, and then the trustees would have to vote. If the evidence and the reasons for the challenge are political or personal, the materials cannot be removed. An MBLC staffer has called all 350 public libraries in the past month and found that at least 45 of them don't have collection development policies, and so she's helping them get it together. And some of them have the policies, but they don't have the reconsideration forms. The reconsideration forms are really important. It turns out that the forms themselves are a deterrent because people just don't want to bother filling them out, or they haven't read the book, so they can't fill it out. You probably ask, why don't the libraries have the policy and forms? I mean, really, why don't they have them? Likely because they're underfunded, they don't have enough staff, and they're too busy. The schools would go through an even more robust process. The schools would go through an even more robust process of reconsideration. The book challenger must fill out and answer the questions on an even longer reconsideration form. If the legislation passes as is to overturn a school librarian's book selection or material selection of any kind, the bill would require a review process by a committee of school personnel. They must create a report which goes up the line to the superintendent, who makes a recommendation to the school committee. The school committee must then hold a hearing and consider the evidence and vote to remove the material. Some of this is already part of the Wellesley procedures. But again, not every school district even has these policies. For the schools, if the legislation passes, the evidence must show, quote, clear and convincing evidence that the material is devoid of educational, literary, artistic, or social value, or is not age appropriate for any student in the school, for the material to be removed. And yet, after all that, challenge books might still be removed. You never know who's going to run for school committee or for library trustee. If a book is removed, a writ of mandamus is included in the legislation. In other words, while the onus is on the school committee or the trustees for their vote, the bill also provides redress to restore materials. The language makes clear that if people can successfully demand to remove an item, others can work to successfully challenge the removal and restore it. One of my favorite parts of the bill is that the bill protects public librarians from retaliation. They can't be dismissed, disciplined, placed on probation, fined, or imprisoned for the books found in the library. 7 states have successfully passed, and signed by the governor, legislation to fine librarians tens of thousands of dollars and imprison library workers for what the state considers obscene material. 2 of the governors did not sign the legislation, I just remembered. According to the Washington Post, 12 more states are considering legislation that would incorporate this legislation, retaliation. Preventing harassment of librarians would help a lot. The in-your-face harassment has them upset and depressed, and many are quitting. That doesn't help anyone's education. I noticed that the legislation doesn't directly prevent school librarians from retaliation. So I called Alex Nally, the legislative counsel who drafted the bill. He said that licensed school library teachers probably belong to teachers' unions and already have some protections through collective bargaining. In addition, changes in education laws are very hard to get through the legislature, and sometimes you just leave things out of legislation to increase the probability and the speed of passage. We agreed that it's certainly an important thing to bring up during testimony, and we certainly will. There are 2 bills filed in the House and 2 bills in the Senate. One of the House bills is, in fact, the Illinois bill. The bills are currently, I have to admit that a whole lot of legislators really don't understand how libraries operate. It's kind of too bad, but it's been a goal of mine for the last 12 years to make sure they do. And I know I've made some difference. One of the bills are currently in committee and will go through markup. Bills that pass will need to be reconciled after amendments. You know, we do scratch our heads and wonder at some challenges over the years. The Dr. Seuss book, The Lorax, was challenged because of the way logging was depicted and consumerism. Harriet the Spy was challenged because she talks back, spies on others, and she's a little naughty. Actually, she reminds me of some friends of mine. James Guess who it is? James and the Giant Peach is frequently challenged because some believe it's too scary and reflects communism. The award-winning Where the Wild Things Are is often challenged because some consider it traumatizing to children. Not surprising, though, Huckleberry Finn was first banned in 1885 and is the most challenged book of all time in the United States. And right there at the refreshment table, I believe those are all books that have been challenged or even banned. I'm surprised you don't have any Harry Potter books up there, because all 7 have been challenged somewhere. And there's a church in Waltham, Mass, or Wakefield, in one of the W towns. There's a church in one of the W towns that banned completely, a church school that banned all Harry Potter books. The Peabody, Mass. Public Library has started a banned book club for teens. I cannot think of a better way to get teens reading. I mean, can you? Really? The kids will read some of the books on the challenge list, like To Kill a Mockingbird, Lord of the Flies, The Diary of Anne Frank, which it just blows my mind that that's been challenged, and the like. The teens will make their own decisions about what they read and discuss. You know, book banning isn't new. The first book challenge in in Massachusetts was in 1674. And book challenges will likely always be with us. There was even book burning in the United States in the 1950s. But this was last year. In a suburb of Nashville, Tennessee, books in that fire, the graphic novel Mouse and the Harry Potter books. May I finish with the unexpected words of a former president? It's not who you think. So thank you so much. We'll be looking forward to your comments. Whoops. Come on. There we go. Sorry. We're looking for your comments and your questions. Jamie and Linda and I will be happy to answer any questions. I insisted on their being here because I said I cannot answer any local questions. Thank you. I couldn't see these things. It's too dark up here. Too dark.
Marianne, thank you so much. So we've passed out cards. If you have a question, we're going to ask people to write them down on the cards, and then we promise to read every card that we have time for, so no censorship of questions, but we just thought it'd be a little more orderly. So if you could, I'm going to give you a few minutes to write down your questions, and to stall, I'm going to tell you my censorship story, or my book challenge. Because here I am, I don't know if everyone knows this, but I was actually a library trustee for quite a long time before I joined the select board, and I really, really, really love libraries. I really love our library. But even I'm a parent, and my daughter was in elementary school, and I'm gonna say not in a Wellesley school, she was in a private school, and she brought home a graphic novel of the Twilight books, which I still have not read myself, but a graphic novel. So there's a lot of romance, love, sex in those books, and it's very graphic. And I thought she must have been 8 or 9 at the time, and I was like, what? Why would they bring this home? And I did call the librarian, and I did talk to her, and there was a discussion, and like a week later, I got a call back, and they said, you know what, we've decided it should be in the middle school library. It shouldn't have been in the elementary school library. And I was like, oh, did I just contribute to banning a book? I didn't mean to do that. But, I think as parents, though, I mean, we do have a role to play, as Marianne said, in what our children read. That is our job. And I think she was really mad at me. And, pardon?
No, I wasn't really.
No, not Mary. My daughter was very mad at me at the time, but that's being a parent, right? They're mad at you most of the time. And there's a lot of things she's read since that my kids now know so much more than I will ever know from everything they read. So that is my book banning story. So I'm just going to wait for I didn't know you could do that. That's like really clever. Marguerite, do you have some questions there? I can start reading them? Okay. So please keep coming up with questions. All right. Does the legislation address challenges based on religion? Do you know?
Of course.
Of course. So you had mentioned that you can't ban books or you can't remove books based on your own personal beliefs. So that would cover, you had mentioned race, gender, sexuality, but religion would be in there as well.
If someone wanted to challenge a book because it was about Islam, that wouldn't surprise me.
But the legislation, you'd have to follow the same process if that passed.
Yes, it
Yes.
would be the same process.
Excellent. What role should school district librarians and the community play in the bans of education in the form of books on the history and culture of systemic racism?
Could you read that again?
Yeah, okay, sorry. What role should school districts, libraries, and the community, okay, now I got it. What role should school districts, libraries, and the community play in the bans of education in the form of books on the history and culture of systemic racism?
School question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got the question, but if the question is what role should school districts play in banning?
I think it's
Education,
around that it's, what if it's broader than just books? It's banning, the idea of actually banning a whole area of education.
So,
And this was specifically around systemic racism.
right, I guess the short answer I'd have is I don't see a role in trying to ban any education around systemic racism. I mean, I would, certainly the district is very much focused on equity in general, and in terms of education, when appropriate, certainly, I would think concepts around systemic racism will be discussed in classrooms. It certainly will be covered in books, and so I'm not sure if that gets at the question that was raised, but.
Well, if it doesn't, the writer can write another question. Go ahead, Mary Ann.
There's, for the past few years, about 3 years now, for about 3 years now, in various parts of this country, people have been upset that critical race theory is being taught in elementary school or even in high school. It's not. It's a law school subject or a grad school. And so it's an extraordinary misunderstanding.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do you have concerns about someone flooding the library with requests? How would this impact the boards? The boards? How would this impact the library and the board? And I guess in terms of if the board has to be involved in that,
Right, so as Marianne said, our request for reconsideration form is one form per book. It has to be a resident of Wellesley who fills out the form, and they have to have read the book. Given that, I'm not sure how likely it is that we would get one of those mass requests for reconsideration that other places are getting when they get hundreds. I think our form limits the ability of somebody to do that in a good way.
thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
There's one town in Massachusetts that has had 39 challenges, and that might be the most for any one library. Fortunately, in Massachusetts, well, I don't know why I can say that, because supposedly we're listed as fourth in numbers behind Texas, Florida, and California. But personally, I don't believe it because we know the numbers just aren't correct, and there's no way of knowing because so many people are just not reporting. The librarians are too busy. But I just found out yesterday that Natick has had 6 challenges, which I was surprised at, but shouldn't be surprised at anything anymore.
Okay. So,
Do they have the form? Are they using the form currently?
Dee, you have to fill out a card. Do they have the form in Natick?
I would bet money they use the form, knowing the library staff there.
So how can you be sure that professionals are unbiased, that won't bring their own biases into the choices they make?
So when we go to library school, we learn no human being is unbiased. It's impossible. So you rely on tools, you rely on your education, you rely on experience, you rely on your colleagues to help you create a collection that, you know, displays a wealth of diverse information.
Thank you. How would religious schools be impacted by the bill? Are they exempt? Do we know? It's okay to say we don't know. That's it's a really interesting question. I hadn't thought of that. So there's a copy of the bill
I
on the
did think
table
of
on the
it,
side.
But I don't know. And I did bring a copy of it. And
Yeah.
I just want you to see it and you'll go,
Right.
oh my God.
So there's, right,
How
there's,
did you get that out of that bill?
exactly. Because I do believe that private schools and religious schools are accredited, right, by the state. So there is a copy of the bill over there. So whoever asked that question, read it and let us know what you think. Okay. Do the librarians, oh, do you have something else?
There is someone in the audience I'd like to ask. Deb, do you happen to know? That's Deb Abraham. She used to be on the MBLC. You don't know? Okay.
Okay. Do the librarians here ever suggest to a parent that a book their child is about to check out may not be appropriate for the child?
If they did, it would be based on interest and reading level.
See, based on interest and reading level,
Correct.
but not the subject.
Right.
Interesting.
Then again, that's what I said. Libraries are not in loco parentis. If a
Right.
kid comes home with a book that's not appropriate, it's up to the parent to decide how to talk to them about it, to decide to read it with them, find out, they should know what they can handle and what's appropriate for that particular child.
And I would say librarians certainly don't consider every question to be a challenge. Many people will ask, will my child like this? And that's a question that has to do with, one might not be appropriate because you don't think your child will like it based on interest, reading level, what they've read before. So I think it depends how it's asked.
Excellent. So I'm curious, Jamie, is the library considering, I love that teen book club for banned books. Is that something that Wellesley might consider?
Sure.
The Wellesley bookstore already has a similar display, a collection of banned books, yeah.
Oh, excellent. So are there more questions? Because the last card I have here is blank. I think I've asked every question. Oh, we've got more. Excellent. Thank you, Marguerite. All right. Is there an effort to share a template of the book challenge form with all Massachusetts libraries? Ditto to the collection policy. Are there templates that all libraries can use as a starting place?
So the ALA does provide a template, and it does provide examples of plans and policies. We use the ALA in creating our request for reconsideration form, and they're an excellent resource.
So is the MBLC. There is a staff member now who's working with these 45 libraries, is sending them templates, working with them, and I can tell you, I have never worked with such a dedicated staff in my life, anywhere. They spend literally hours on the telephone. They'll spend literally hours on the telephone with an individual librarian, just to make sure to work them through materials, to work them through their reporting. And I mean, when I say hours, I mean like 16 to 20 hours with an individual library to make sure that it'll turn out okay and they'll get their state aid.
So, Marianne, if someone here wanted to follow the legislation, to see what's going on, do you have any idea what would be the best way for them to do that?
Through the League of Women Voters, who I'm sure will be following it.
So
Bill's number is SD 2673. Right. There's two of them in the Senate that are filed. They're almost identical. They'll have to be merged somehow first, in some way, I suspect. But there are so many ways that they do things on the Hill that God only knows sometimes. I have a selfie with Julie and Sarah. I don't know if that'll help. But
well, I do want to say, so the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts is following this legislation. As of a few days ago, we hadn't, that the state has not decided if they're sponsoring it or supporting it yet, probably because there are multiple different versions and trying to parse through that. So absolutely, we're going to be keeping an eye on this. So if you're interested in learning more, one way to do that is join the League, and we'll keep you up to date as that moves through. All right, Deed, I'll call on you. Go ahead.
Well, there's no more cards.
Go ahead, Deed. I'm going to repeat it because I want to get it on the mic. So go ahead.
So the reconsideration form, what if someone was, targeting a specific book and submitting reconsideration forms at multiple libraries or having people do that? Is there a process by which the librarians and boards kind of talk to each other and kind of monitor what books are being challenged and that sort of thing? Because I believe that there might be people who would take such an approach, and I would want to make sure that you could benefit from one another.
So is there a mechanism for libraries to talk to each other, to find out what's being challenged at other Massachusetts libraries, to learn from each other, to know what's coming down the pipeline?
Yes, so I would say one way to deter that is what we've asked is that you have to be a resident of Wellesley. So certainly that doesn't mean that a resident of Wellesley could have a friend or a colleague somewhere else who encourages them to do this. Number two, they have to read the book themselves, right? And three, yes, we have a very, very robust listserv and connection to other librarians in the state. Very, very recent, long thread going on lately about public records requests, and a recent records request requesting all of the challenges that the library has received since 2021. So yes, absolutely, people know what's going on in other locations and very aware of what could be coming down the pike for us.
And actually, that records request also went to the schools as well, so they're trying to understand school districts as well, whether they've had
Linda,
challenges.
is it your understanding, do the school librarians have the same kind of network with each other?
I would imagine that they do. I don't know for sure, but I imagine that they do. And yeah, they definitely have, job alikes, and they seek out others that have similar roles. I did actually want to add kind of to the earlier question about templates and policies. The Massachusetts Association of School Committees does have a database of policies, and as a school district, we can certainly reference their policies. We can basically search any other towns or any other school district's policies. So in our case, we do have, I think Mary Ann very kindly pointed out the policies that we have in place at the Wellesley Public Schools, and we actually have a terrific director of libraries and innovation, and it was actually during the course of last year, she had brought forward some recommended changes to our policies around materials selection as well as resources. And so that's why she helped us look good, because we did make those changes just last year. And she also encouraged us to have a consistent set of policies for all instructional materials. So it applies to the library materials as well as instructional materials.
There is MSLA, Massachusetts School Libraries Association. They come to most of our board meetings, and I know a number of them quite well. 2 school librarians have been appointed to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners now. And we're working very, very hard to try to help school librarians, but we can't even find out how many there are. It's home rule. It's kind of amazing. Did I mention that there is an MBLC staffer who used to say there are 350 public libraries in Massachusetts doing things in 350 different ways, with the exception of state aid. That's the only thing we have that corrals them. I mean, home rule is kind of, you're not the boss of me. Very much like that. And so with each town and city and town doing things in different ways, it's very hard to stay on top of it. That's why the state aid CMRs, those regulations that are in state law and they have to follow, are so critical. There are 348 libraries participating right now, and 2 are not, probably because they don't have the money. And but if they do get back, I mean, the number fluctuates like maybe 2 to 3 a year as to how many libraries and towns are participating.
And Mara, can I just go back to the human bias question? Because sitting right in front of me is a list of criteria that we use when we're purchasing items. And this might help, and I never would be able to memorize it, but it's right here. So some of the criteria are relevance to community needs, high customer demand, significance or reputation of author or publisher, attention of critics and reviewers, importance of human or social insight, representation of current ideas, events, or mores, accuracy, clarity, logic of presentation, comprehensiveness and completeness of treatment, building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive collection, originality of point of view, artistic presentation or experimentation, representation of important genre or trend, suitability of format to library circulation and use, price, availability, and library materials budget, date of publication. So there's a lot that goes into these choices.
Thank you.
Hey, Maura, I think I have another question from the audience. I was just wondering, the 2 towns, how much does it cost the towns? Those 2 towns that can't afford.
How much money are we talking that a town can't
The appropriation,
afford to be
their
in the
appropriation
network?
requirement is an average of the last 3 years of appropriations times 2.5% increase. So it's not a 2.5% increase each year, but it's the average of the last 3 years. And what we're looking for is disproportionate cuts. If the whole town is going down the tubes, and we have actually had cases where the whole town had a their only factory was keeping them alive, and the whole town had a 50% cut in their whole budget, well, then that's not disproportionate. But for instance, and I can think of a number of times where everybody had a 10% increase or a 2.5% increase, and the library had a 20% cut. Then they have to, and then we're all over them. They have to come in and they're on the carpet, in other words. The library director, the mayor or the town manager, the finance director, about 4 people from the town has to come in, and we ask them questions. And then a month later, we may or may not vote to continue to certify them or decertify them. It's a very hard vote for a trustee to take when they might, if a library has been decertified, it is a very hard vote for a trustee to take in a neighboring community or in any across the state to deny borrowing privileges from another town. And Holly, do you remember when we had to vote to not allow Needham to borrow from us? It happened. But pitchforks and torches came out and in Needham, and within 1 year they were back, fully funded. It works.
Right. Yeah, there's also, there's a few other requirements that the state has in order to fund libraries. And, so I've been asked, why does the state do this? It's just because if you think about it, if Needham wasn't going to fund their library because they're saying, well, Wellesley does, we don't have to fund one in Needham. I mean, is that really fair to the residents of Wellesley? We all should be supporting our libraries. And this mechanism does that and keeps everyone on a level playing field to the best of their ability.
On the other hand, one of the towns that is not participating actually thinks the other town over should pick up the trash.
Really?
Okay. I think that, Jen, were you going to come back up to close the program? Any other questions? Any final questions? Oh.
If a book goes through the request to be banned process and gets denied, can the same person put the request in again, and does it have to start all over again?
I'm going to just repeat that for the recording. So if somebody puts in a request to ban a book or to limit a book, and the request is denied, can they just put the request in again, or is there a time period they have to wait?
It hasn't happened, but I suppose they could. I would not anticipate a different result.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you guys, all of you. I really appreciate you being here tonight. And I'm going to turn it back over to Jen to close the program.
Thank you. I want to thank everyone so much for this wonderful discussion about such a crucial topic. I love books, and they really must be protected. I just have to tell a funny story. I think the only question my mom and I ever had for ILR, my librarian growing up in my town, was how many books can you check out at once? And my mom said 8, but I don't think that's what the librarian said. So.
The librarian probably said as many as you want.
I think so, but my mom took me every week with my 8 books, so that was how she handled it. I want to give a few special thank yous here to Ms. Kluggish for that powerful presentation and your dedicated work for libraries throughout the years. I want to thank you to Ms. Jurgensen for your thoughtful answers and your hard work leading the Wellesley Free Library System, especially through the pandemic, because I believe, were you the first library to open back up?
Not in the state, but very close.
Very close. That's hard work. Thank you. And I want to thank Ms. Chow for sharing the policies of the school and your amazing work throughout the years on the school committee. How about just another round of applause? Oh, sorry. Oh, do you want to say something?
No, I forgot Ellie Perkins, please.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you. And then we're almost done, folks. But since it is a League of Women Voters meeting, I just want to share a bit more of what's going on at both the national, state, and Wellesley levels. On a national level, the League of Women Voters US has some 2023 legislative priorities, and I just want to share them. They're including voting rights, improving elections, campaign finance and money in politics, just a plug for Nancy Meyer's Dark Money, which was amazing. The direct election of the president by popular vote, including through the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, and the abolition of the Electoral College, and redistricting. Then we get down to the state level, and there are 45 chapters in Massachusetts of League of Women Voters. And some of the Massachusetts items that are being advocated are for improving gun safety, a very important item currently being debated, protecting reproductive rights and increasing voting access. The League recently undertook a year-long process to update the position on affordable housing, which is another crucial issue. And I want to give a shout out to our legislative envoy, Margie Palladino, who was instrumental in establishing the League of Women Voters of Massachusetts support for legislation that increased protection against domestic violence and abusive family court litigation. So thank you. And then we're going to go down to our town level here. On the programs component, we have got a volunteer fair coming up this coming Sunday and Monday, October 1st and 2nd, in conjunction with the library. Just a little plug too, because I have a confirmation kid, so it's going to be organizations throughout the town that need volunteers. So what a wonderful opportunity. I'm so excited we're doing this. You can come to the library, you can learn about all of the different organizations. I feel like we have a lot of good, hard volunteers here, but we can spread the word to our kids and our family and our friends. In October, there is going to be a coffee. Details will be worked and shared. On November 17th, Greg Riebman from the Charles River Chambers of Commerce will be joining. And on November 30th, there's going to be a housing program to talk about the MBTA communities law that the governor just passed. So we'll be sharing information about all of those in our newsletter. And just voter services, my little slice of the woods. On November 1st, we're going to have a special town meeting prep for any town meeting members out there. We're going to have it at the Tolles Parsons Center, where you can learn about the items that will be in our special town meeting. And in December, we're going to have a how to run for public office. And again, let's spread the word. Town meeting members, there's other boards. It takes all of us to pitch in, folks. And lastly, if you'd like to join the League of Women Voters Wellesley, we would love to have you. We have forms that you can fill out over there at the blue table right next to Ann Mara. And if you have any questions, please let any of us know. And just a huge thank you to everyone for coming out. We know how busy it is to come in person and take this time. We're so grateful. Thank you, and drive safely.